محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين بارد الخلاق أجمعين سيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا مولانا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين اصطفاهم الله أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تكرهوا فتياتكم على البغاء إن أردنا تحسنا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. My respected elders, my respected brothers and sisters, I bid you all assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I start in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, the omniscient, the omnipotent. All praise is due to Allah for giving us the ability and the chance to exist. And our existence is an understanding and a time for us to be able to move forward and try to advance in our worlds and to truly try to get somewhere in our lives. Take the capabilities that we have and try to move forward with these capabilities. And this movement is not only a male movement. This isn't only a specific message for men, but also a specific message for women. That as much as men are meant to move forward, women are also meant to move forward. And in the verse that we stated yesterday, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We've created you from male and female. And God within the Quran makes an emphasis all the time about the equality that happens between men and women and their opportunities to move forward in life. That the religion is not only a patriarchal religion where only men are meant to rule or men are meant to be the ones who move forward and women are just meant to be second-class citizens of subservience. But the Quran and Islam in its totality is meant and geared towards men and women to move forward. And that's why one of the big discussions today that's very recent is the idea of the role of the female within Islam and within our societies today. Because many people come and say, look, being in the 21st century, what is the role of the Muslim female? What is the role of the Muslim female when it comes to Islamic scholarship and ideas of scholarly writings? Where are our Muslim female thinkers? We have many interpretations of the Quran. Where are our females who interpret the Quran? Where are the female speakers? And where are the females who have presence within the Islamic doctrine today, or ones who are practically involving themselves in Islam? And a discussion about the role of the woman in Islam and in today's world is an extremely important discussion. Because anytime you want to see any sort of oppression in the media about Islam, it's always thrown out very easily. Take a look at Time magazine. In the past 5 or 10 years, one of the biggest headlines is a woman wearing a burqa, and she's standing in front of a camera and she looks very disheveled, destroyed, tired, with 2 or 3 or 4 children next to her. And the headline might read, Muslims beating their wives, for example. A lot of the time there is an image given of the Muslim woman that the Muslim woman is a second-class citizen. She's not meant to partake in many of the things that men do. She's not meant to organize. She's not meant to be a scholar. She's not meant to be a thinker. She's not meant to come and give her opinion on Islamic ideologies and Islamic ideas. And the ideology that's given is Islam is more of a patriarchal religion than everything. And then you've got people, and I'll dissect this today, who bring forward the wife-beating verse and try to prove that Islam treats their women as second-class citizens. And the women are meant to be subservient to the men are meant to be the caretakers, and the women are subservient to them. And after that, right, there is an okay from the Quran for a man to beat his wife, etc., etc. And again, I'll go through that today to kind of explain it, because it's anything from the truth of the reality. And the question that we ask is, on nights like these, where we are really thinking about Islam and the ideologies of Islam, the question that comes up is, A, what did Islam do to change the status of the woman in Arabia to what it is now? What are the steps that Islam took? And on a second level, what is the role of the Muslim woman today? Because the question that's asked, and I'll say this again because it's important, is where are our Muslim female thinkers today? Is it simply a patriarchal religion where only men are meant to dominate? Or do women have a role in this religion where they're able to disseminate knowledge? They're able to come forward and give their own ideas about Islam. Are there any females today who might be having a Quran tafsir where they come up and say, look, this is my ideologies and what's happening in the Quran, because I'm a female, I'm a part of this society, and the same as there are male scholars, there also should be female scholars, because many people are asking, if the woman does have a scholarly presence in Islam, then where is that presence today? And I'll also hit on the topic tonight of the struggle that the modern Muslim or the modern female Muslim faces today. There's a complete struggle between the East and the West, and I'll go through that struggle tonight, inshallah. But something that's important to note is that in the Arabian culture, the woman was treated very differently to how Islam actually asks us to treat women. Women at that time had absolutely no role. And when I say no role, there were simply objects to be traded back and forth. Meaning a woman was set as a slave. She would be bought and sold. And the verse that I started off with, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ إِنْ أَرَدْنَ تَحَصُّنًا. Because what the Arabians used to do is they realized that everything has an economic value. The reason we appreciate something is because it's got a form of economic value. And they soon came to realize, and this is why the female burial would happen, that the woman in Arabia had no economic value. A, she couldn't work. I mean, you've got a woman like Khadija, and that's why Khadija is so revolutionary, and we'll get to that today in just a bit. But most women could not work. If they weren't cared for by the males, they would maybe starve. If there was war and the men were killed, the woman, as they would think in the Arabian culture, would destroy the name of the males because they would be taken as slaves. They might be hurt physically, emotionally, and that's why the Arabians in their early times specifically decided that the best way to get rid of the economic problem, which is the female, because she was seen as an economic problem of the time, the best way and the best thing for us to do is what? Is to take them and bury them whenever they come up. Many people decided to go away from this, but the majority had been burying their females at the time. The second thing they did is they realized that the only actual benefit of the female is sexual satisfaction. And what they did in Arabia is they set up these brothel houses where women were bought and sold on the market. She was sold and bought to brothel houses, and the Arabians were big on these houses. And that's why the Quran came. Many parents had forced their daughters into such actions. The Quran came and said what? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ إِنْ أَرَدْنَ تَحَصُّنًا. Don't force your daughters into prostitution if they want to be pure or clean. Don't force them into some specific actions. That the woman is not meant to be taken as a sexual slave, but she has a specific role in society. And that's why the Quran came today and said what? It came and said, don't force your woman into such actions. And it's interesting because today if you go on Forbes magazine and you see the illegal markets that are in the world, the sexual trafficking market is a $28 billion market, and it's number 4 on Forbes list. Because it's such a huge market, and specifically within certain areas, Europe is known. It's very big for such human trafficking. Human trafficking is a very big market today. And it kind of shows us that even though it happened a long time ago, it still happens today. You've got certain parts of India where there are women known as Devadasis, and these women are at their young age forced into acts of prostitution within that specific land. If a girl worships a specific god, she is forced into that god's ways, and that god perhaps is known as the god of prostitution, where a woman spends her life doing this act and she's forced by her parents to do this. When she becomes 50 or 45, she's immediately shunned from the whole of society, because all of a sudden she's lived her whole life as a prostitute. Now no one is even willing to look at her. And the Quran came essentially to tell them that a woman to Arabia is much more than a sexual object, but she has an actual role within this land. There are certain things that she does which make her important. And the Quran and the Prophet took it upon themselves to actively change the way that Arabia saw the female. And it's an extremely important change. You've got many people even today within the Islamic doctrines, who are completely influenced by Christian doctrine and Christian understandings. For example, in the 1600s, you had, for example, John Milton, who came up with his famous book, Milton's Paradise Lost. And in Milton's Paradise Lost, in about the 1600s, there was a big Christian movement which kind of wanted to bring the idea of a female being secondary to the male from the Christian doctrine into the Muslim and the Christian doctrine. And there was a strong success in that. Because what Milton said, Milton came forward and said what? He said, look, the woman, the Eve was the actual cause of why Adam was brought down from heaven. He said, because if it wasn't for Eve, Adam would have never been tempted. And because he was tempted, that's why he was removed from the highest level of heavens, he was brought down to earth. And Milton's Paradise Lost was one of the main Christian texts. And what Milton wanted to do was to express to the people that because of the female is why we are here, and why men are superior to females. And he also came within the same book and gave the doctrine that men were created from the ribs of female. That the female, was created from the rib of the male. That males are more superior, they were created first, and then females were created. And these types of writings, which influenced Europe and America at the time, because mind you, this was very big in Europe and America at the time, also influenced certain parts of Islam and also certain parts of Christianity. Where you find even in Judaism, many people come in today and say, look, the reason the women are second-class citizens is because they were the ones who tempted Adam. And of course, Islam comes forward and shuns that from the Quran. Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. We created you from a male and female. There's no difference. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. Islam came to take any of these writings which might have come up in the 1600s, and specifically the thought-provoking writings by John Milton, and came and said, look, there is absolutely no basis to these writings, and you can't. It's interesting because you really blame them, and then you can't blame them because you know that within their writings and within their religious books, a lot of this patriarchy comes out. That men are more superior, men are better, women are the second-class citizens. And Islam needed to take it on itself to reform this very role and to change it, because it understood that the woman had many more benefits than just that benefit that they gave them. On many levels, one level, socially, Islam came to really abolish many things. And here's a brief example. As we mentioned 2 nights ago, in Arabia, men at times, when their daughters were born, they would bury them, right? One Arabian narrates, he says, I took my daughter to a specific grave, and I walked her to that grave. And those of you who have daughters, you can imagine how painful it is for a man to drag his daughter to bury her. He says, I took my daughter and I walked her to the grave, and as we were walking, I started to sweat. And my daughter took a handkerchief and she started to wipe the sweat from my forehead, right? I was carrying her, she takes the handkerchief and she, wipes the sweat. He said, that situation really hurt my heart. He says, I took her and I started digging the hole. And as I was sweating and sweating, my daughter continued to wipe my forehead from all of the sweat that was coming down. He says, and I took her, she knew I was going to bury her, and I grabbed her and I put her in the grave that I had, created for her. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes, telling me, Father, will you bury me? Father, help me, aid me. He says, at that moment when I saw her, I was putting the soil on her, and I could see her hands extended out of the soil. Imagine what a sight for a father to see that they're burying the daughter and the daughter sticks her hand out of the grave and says, Father, help me. He says, from that situation, my heart was very broken over my daughter. And for many Arabians, that culture was understood because, again, to them, burying the daughter was a more economic and more financially viable solution than not burying the daughter. Because A, the woman would not work and help them economically, and B, if there was a war, the woman would not be taken as a sex slave or a captive. And hence, in both ways, they were completely safe, right? And it's a very sad mentality to see. When Islam came, one of the main cultures that the Prophet had to change was this culture of burying the daughter. He immediately banished that because he realized that if you are to make anything of your woman, then stop burying them. On a second level, the Prophet wanted to really change the way that Arabian men saw their wives. The Arabian men, the way they saw their wives was a very, very destructive way. One thing they did, for example, was if a man came home and he was interested in his wife sexually, and the wife wasn't interested, the man would leave the house and the wife would never see him ever again. That was a culture that Arabians had. The way that they had treated their wives was as a simple sexual object. One lady comes to the Prophet, and specifically in Surah Al-Mujadala, she comes to the Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, my husband came home and I wasn't interested and he immediately left and I never saw him again. That was the culture. Do I get married again? Am I allowed to live, by my own? I have kids. What do I do? What's his responsibilities? The Prophet said to her, if he's gone and he's not taking care of you, then you are immediately free on your own. Because many of these Arabian men simply ditched their wives the moment they weren't interested physically in them. And Rasulullah wanted to reform the way that these Muslims had seen their wives. And I'll give you a basic example. Because a wife to them had no solace. The wife to them had no human emotional solace. To them, she was just there to satisfy a need. For him to feed her, to treat her like dirt, to beat her, to not care for her, and that was just it. The Prophet, in one example, for example, when Sa'd ibn Mu'adh was being married, the Prophet made a comment and he said to the Arabians around him, he said to them, look, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh is dying. We're burying him in his grave. There are so many angels around him. And one man comes to the Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, if there are so many angels next to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, that's amazing. What a lucky man. He says to them, yes, there are angels next to him. But in just a moment, the grave is going to squeeze him so much that the pain he's going to feel is as if all of his bones in his body are breaking. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, why? If there are angels next to him, why would the grave squeeze him and break his bones? What's the deal? He said to them, because Sa'd in his life had a specific quality which was detested. When he would go out, when he was out with his friends, he was very happy, very pleasant, very kind. The minute he came home to his wife, he had the meanest face to her and he would never sit and talk to her. And at that point, Rasulullah brought the hadith and he said, if a man sits with his wife and converses for an hour, only 1 hour, is better than doing a full night of ibadah under the sky of Medina. And the Arabians were shocked. You mean sitting and talking to my wife, actually just talking, like having a conversation, whether we philosophize, whether we talk about our relationship, whether we talk about our kid, whether we talk about life, sitting for 1 hour is better than doing worship in Medina for the whole night? Rasulullah said yes. And the Arabians were completely shocked at this, because how do we accept this? At one point you're telling us to pray, God will be happy with us. On another point you're telling us that dry worship doesn't mean anything. And mind you, this isn't the first time. On many occasions the Prophet comes to the Arabians and says to them, look, there's something much more important than just your dry worship. To many people he would say, for example, if you pray or if you reflect for 1 hour, it's better than 70 years of dry worship. To others he would say it's better than 1,000 years of dry worship. To these Arabians who are unkind to his wife, he tells them sitting with your wife for an hour is better than a full night ibadah under Medina. What's he trying to tell them? He's telling them there's something much deeper about Islam than your mechanical ups and downs of your prayer. Your ups and downs of prayers are important. But if no one is caring for you and your family, there's no benefit in that. One man comes to the Prophet, for example. They said to him, Ya Rasulullah, there is a man in the masjid who prays 24/7. We have never seen a man like him. Rasulullah says, that's great. Who cares for his family? Sorry, what did you say? Who cares for his family? He says his brother. He says his brother is better than him. His brother, the one that cares for the family, is better than the man who's sitting and worshiping 24/7. He says, why? He says, because this man hasn't realized what Islam is actually about. Islam isn't actually about you sitting on your musalla 24/7 doing munkari, or sitting hours upon hours doing ibadah and forgetting the rest of your life. That's good from time to time. Islam promotes that seclusion at times and sitting and doing your ibadah. But Islam completely disagrees with this idea of munkari, that I sit my whole life and all I do is pray and fast or read dua. That's all I do in my life. No, Islam disagrees with that. And that's why the Prophet on many occasions, in order for him to make better the role that he has with the female, he says discussing for your wife for 1 hour is better than a full night of ibadah. And I'll tell you something. That could have not been, that statement could have not been more psychologically right by the Prophet than anything else. And I'll tell you why. There was a recent book that was published called The 7 Ways of Making Marriage Work by Dr. Professor John Gottman, who's the leading #1 expert on relationships in America. Dr. John Gottman had a specific research called the Love Lab, one of the most interesting studies you will ever see. And those of you who are married, or those of you who are looking to get married, please review the Love Lab. Review the love lab. It's extremely important. What he did is about 14 years ago, took about 1,000 couple, and he separated them into different rooms over weeks and weeks of weeks, and he had them sit down and speak about their issues. Whatever issue they had amongst themselves, whether it's about money or finances or mother-in-law or father-in-law or family or whatever, he had them sit down and discuss the issue for an hour, right? And this is a very famous study known as the Love Lab. Research it online, it'll come up right away. What he did is he had them sit for an hour, discuss. After they finished for an hour, he would take notes on the way that they talked. How did they talk to each other? Did they have a strong startup? Did they speak sarcastically? Did they speak to each other with contempt? Did they stonewall each other? Did one get up and leave? How did they discuss the actual issue that's between them? He took details of all of these and he let the 1,000 couple go. And before he let them go, he made predictions on which one of them would be married in 7 years, which one of them would be divorced, and which one of them would be married but not happy. 3 different categories: married, divorced, married but not happy. Because married, not happy, many people stay together, they're married, but they're not happy. They're as miserable as can be. They're together for their kids though, right? For their kids, or for a specific reason. Or culturally it's not allowed. What he did is he went back after 7 years and he chased up all 1,000 clients that he did the study with in the Love Lab. And he was so accurate in his findings. He was 95% accurate to the findings that he did in those 1,000 couple that he had in his lab. And he broke marriages down and the reasons why people divorce and why their relationships don't work to 4 different categories. 1, contempt. 2, sarcasm. 3, stonewalling. 4, so stonewalling, sarcasm, contempt, and certain types of humor which comes out to be very, very negative. He broke down why relationships are destroyed within 4 categories. And he had a best-selling book, as I just mentioned, 7 ways to make marriage last, one of the best sellers in America. And his research broke the ground about male and female conversation. When the Prophet came 1400 years ago, when he was telling the Arabians, sit with your wives and speak to them for an hour, what he's trying to say is do it because it can save your relationship. There are many people today who look, I'm married, no problem, but I come home, I put my feet up on the pedestal, my wife makes me the food, right? I come home and I pay the bills, I take care of it. I don't listen to her emotions. I don't want to hear about emotions. I don't listen to how she feels every day. I don't understand why she might be upset. I don't sit with her and actually say to her, look, what's the feeling that you're having? Are you happy with life? Am I not giving you that emotional comfort that you need? And Dr. John Gottman breaks it down. He says, look, many people blame the female that she is very emotional, and that, that makes the reason of why, men and women divorce. And through his research, he's actually found in a Yale study that men are more emotional than females in many different regards. And men are very surprised to hear this all the time. You're trying to tell me that I'm more emotional than a woman? Because we typically have the stereotype that women are emotional and men are not very emotional. In the Yale study that he did, he found that when men get upset, their heart rates are much higher than females. And it takes a much longer time for their heart rates to decrease, meaning they get angrier at a higher capacity, and it's much harder for them to cool down and calm down. The velocity might not be the same, meaning women might get upset or angry more often, depends on the female, it's not all the same. But men, when they do get emotional, it's at a much higher rate, and it's harder for them to calm down after that. And there's a stereotype that's given, right, that women are emotional and men aren't. And unless this is broken in our society, and perhaps what the Prophet is saying, look, sit with your wife for an hour, talk to her, show her that side of you that actually cares. Because many people before they get married, the guy will sit with the female, right, with his wife, he'll talk to her for hours, 2, 3, 4 hours, interesting. The minute they get married, she's like, look, we never sit together, I never see you. We never sit and philosophize the way we did before. We don't sit and talk about life the way we did before. We don't do anything together anymore. It's simply eating, sleeping, waking up, going to work, to school. That lifestyle that we had before isn't there. And perhaps what the messenger is saying to the Arabians, if you really want to carry a happy life, then make your wife happy. Sit with her for an hour. The Prophet came to Arabia to change that stereotype that the Arabians had about females. And that stereotype was what? Your wife is there simply as a sexual satisfaction and a beauty to your eyes, and that's it. He was like, no, the woman has emotions. She's got a life that she's living. She has a career. She has a path that she wants to take. Sit with her. Make sure that you are on the same page, because that's better for you than a full night of ibadah under Medina. And that's why Rasulullah came with the beautiful hadith. What did he say? He says, telling your wife, I love you, is a saying which will never leave her heart. This to the Arabian was unheard. The Arabian who would sell and buy his wife, whose wife to him was a sexual object, which if he died, his son would inherit, saying, I love you to her was unheard of. What do you mean, I love you to your wife? Well, what are you talking about? This is rubbish to me. When the Prophet came and made that statement, it was big for the Arabians, because all of a sudden they could appreciate their wives and a level of appreciation much deeper than what they saw. And on a third level, the way that the woman was changed was the Prophet came to them and said what? He said to them, look, a mother is meant to be respected, and a mother is meant to be taken care of. And that's why he came out with the profound hadith which says what? Heaven lies underneath the feet of the mother. To the Muslim Arabians who were living at the time, heaven being under the feet of a mother is a very big thing. It's a huge deal. And it helped them change this image of how they saw women, how they expected women. On a second level, economically, Islam came to change the way that the woman was cared for. First of all, it came and said, look, give your woman a dowry. And on a second level, she has no responsibility when it comes to financials. A husband is meant to care for that and taking care of that. Many people come today and say, look, they complain, they say, look, well, this is not fair to the man today. Meaning, if a man is not working and the wife is working, and she's expecting the husband to take care of her, what should she do? Obviously, in the situation like we have today, if a man is not working and the woman is working, then it's upon each other, the kindness of their hearts to care for each other. One gives to the other, one cares for the other. But in that time when the messenger came and said, look, your wives are meant to be taken care of by you. You are meant to care for them, and they aren't meant to pay a penny. That was a huge economic change for the women, because all of a sudden they were cared for. They were protected. On a second level, they were not allowed to be economic property, because a woman was seen as an economic property to be passed down from a father to the son. If I am a man and I am married and I have a son, when I die, my wife is literally a piece of property and a slave given to my son, and he controls her as he pleases. It's a very screwed system, a very backward system. And the Prophet came and said, look, your women are not your property. They are their own human being. They have their own freedoms. They have their own destinies. They have their own brains. They have their own careers. Allow them to be what they want to be. Allow them to go out and act as they want. And hence the Prophet completely changed that. On a third level, he actually allowed specific political participation of women in Arabia. And perhaps one of the most important roles in that specific time was the movement of the Prophet when he took a female political figure in a very massive Muslim demonstration. And I'm talking about Mubahala. Mubahala is interesting for certain reasons. One reason that's typically missed is Mubahala brings about a very interesting point. And that is, if you look at the history behind Mubahala, there's something very interesting people miss. The Prophet's message was 23 years ever since he started disseminating it in 40. Be very keen to these dates, 23 years. Mubahala was in the 21st year of the Prophet disseminating the message. The whole message was 23. The Prophet died at 63. How old was he when Mubahala was being done? 61, right? 61 to 63. The Prophet, after 21 years in Mubahala, when the Christians came and said, look, we have an issue with you. The Prophet said, you need to pay jizya. The Arabians said, no, we're not paying any jizya. The Prophet then came and said, no problem, but let us come and do Mubahala. We will pray to our God and you will pray to your God, and the one who is wrong will be cursed by God at the specific moment, known as Mubahala. And he said, I'm going to bring individuals with me, and you bring specific individuals with you. They went out and brought the best rabbis with them and the best individuals with them who would represent, Christianity, the Christian monks. The Prophet said, look, I'm going to bring a group of individuals with me that I think are going to represent the entirety of this religion. And it's interesting to note that if the Prophet had been disseminating this message in the beginning, right, in the very beginning when he first was giving Islam, any 5 individuals he would bring would have been normal, fine. He just started the message, he's going to take any 5 individuals and bring them. But after 21 years of being with the people of Arabia, and after studying them and scrutinizing them and living with them for 21 years, those 5 who you bring better be a very, very good 5 because they're representing the whole of your religion. And that's why when Nabi Muhammad comes and brings Fatima, Ali, Hassan, Hussein, what's he saying? He's saying that after being with this community for 21 years, I find no better 5 to represent the religion than these 5 individuals that I brought with me. There's no one else better for the religion than these individuals. Because if it was in the beginning of the message, you say, look, it was now 5 years, 10 years, I'll bring anyone. After 21 years, you know your people very well. You've sat with them, you've ate with them, you've been invited by them, you've molded into them. And that's why he realized that there's no one to take better than you than these individuals. And it's amazing because Fatima al-Zahra plays a crucial political role there. This is a dignitary. He's coming to individuals in one of the biggest Muslim Christian events. Mubahala is big in the Quran and has verses specifically directed to it. When he brings Lady Fatima to that occasion, he's saying that the female is not meant to sit in the background, but she's meant to come out in public and have a political role to these individuals and play some sort of role within me. When he said, I will bring my daughters and bring your daughters and we'll bring our sons and ourselves, what's beautiful is he's saying, look, Fatima al-Zahra represents the whole female aspect of this religion, that she has a political role. Not only that, but Lady Fatima later on many occasions comes out and claims and requests her right. You know, Fadak is interesting because when people bring out Fadak, they forget that the first feminist in Arabia was Fatima al-Zahra. What's feminism? What's feminism today? Feminism is this idea of having equality between males and females. When Fatima al-Zahra came out to request fadak in the beginning, her right wasn't only, this is my piece of land, I want you to take it, but there was an idea that women do not get any inheritance from men. Women get no inheritance. And Fatima al-Zahra's stand wasn't only for a piece of land, it was a full female movement. We are women and we have the right to inherit from our fathers. We are as equal as men. If they are allowed to inherit, then we should also be allowed to inherit. And perhaps one of the first feminist movements is the movement Fatima al-Zahra says, look, we are as equal as you are. You can't come to me and tell me because I'm a woman, I'm not allowed to get a right, or I'm not allowed to get a piece of land. And her stance was not only a stance for a piece of land. No, the land is one thing. But the fact that she stood up for all females is a very dignified stance. As a woman, she's saying, look, you can't just put us to the side. You can't just remove our rights from us. That's why Islam came and said, look, the woman gets a share of the inheritance as the man does. The man gets inheritance, but so does the female. That stand of Lady Fatima on that day was perhaps one of the most beautiful stands. Because she's saying, oh, people of Arabia, we would like you to know that as women, we also should receive the same way the men receive. Islam came in these many ways and completely revolutionized how these backwards Arabians had seen women. And the question that comes up today is interesting because many people ask, look, what's the role of a female today in Islam? What is her role? Does she sit back, right? And I'll be honest, I'm not in a position to speak because I'm a male. A lot of the times we have, sheikhs and scholars who come up, they're males, but they'll very publicly put down women. Women, put on your hijab. Women, stop wearing tight clothes. Women, stop putting on makeup. Women, stop wearing heels. You're a man. As much as you think you understand, you really don't understand. As much as you think you understand. No one will ever know what it's like to wear a hijab in the West like the female who wears it. No one will ever understand these struggles other than the female. As much as you try to put your shoes in that person, yourself in that person's shoes, it's very hard for you to understand because you're living a very diverse life. A very diverse life. And it's interesting to know because people come and ask, look, what's the role of the female today? Are they meant to do something? Are they meant to bring forward some sort of scholarship? And the reply that we give is if Lady Zainab alayha salam took a stance in Arabia and came forward
and gave a beautiful lecture in aqa'id and akhlaq to Yazid, then what does that say about the very responsibilities of the woman today? Are they not allowed to come up with their own scholarly works? Within the Muslim world today, we have a very handful amount of Muslim speakers, males, but there's no females. Maybe one or two, I can count them by finger. One or two Muslim female speakers, not many. You see seminars, it's typically women. Ideas on female progression, it's typically men. Ideas on hijab, it's typically men. But the women need to come on and give that aspect, because if you don't, then your sisters can relate to you. And hence Islam has always been a proponent of women coming out, giving their ideas, giving out their scholarly thoughts, scrutinizing law, writing down ideologies in books, or else you'll get people who come on the pulpit and say, look, it's okay to beat your wives today or beat your women today, and there's no problem with that. A woman can come out and say, no, right? I've scrutinized this verse in the Quran and I disagree. Sayyid Mujtaba Musa Wilari, may Allah bless his soul, comes out with a beautiful analysis on this. Says, look, in the Quran, when Allah uses the word daraba, it's used in about 15 or 16 different contexts. In one verse, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَضْرِبُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, strike the ground and walk away. Sayyid Mujtaba Musa Wilarian says in the Quran, this verse, وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ, does not mean to actually beat them or strike them physically. No. It means walk away from them, step away from them. فَضْرِبُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, walk away, meaning leave them and travel and separate. Because look at the Quranic verse. The Quranic verse says, first of all, bring an arbitrator. Then it says, talk to them. Then it says, don't stay in the same room. Then it says, separate. And the Quranic logic tries to make it seem as if they're saying, after all of these have failed, after your parents have talked, after you have went to an Islamic law system, after you have come and talked, after you've separated, after you divorced, now take them and beat them lightly, because surely after all this beating lightly would definitely work. Sayyid Mujtaba Musa Wilarian says, it's got nothing to do with beating, because beating is not a pragmatic, practical way of making any human being work. This doesn't work for the people before us, this doesn't work for now. Sayyid Mujtaba comes and says, look, this means فَضْرِبُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, walk away from them, separate. If you've divorced now, separate. Don't live in the same place. If female Muslim scholarship is there, such ideas can be brought forward and they can be made clear that the verse of the Quran doesn't mean to actually beat your wives, as many would come and say. Because one attack on Islam today is Islam says beat your wife, and you never hear the end of it. Because none of Islam says that. And it's interesting to know that perhaps the reason why there's not enough Muslim scholarship is one of the reasons, or one thing that comes up today, is that there is a lot of confusion between the Western and the Eastern lifestyle. Many sisters come and approach me and say, look, if there's an issue that we're having today, it's this idea of living between a Western lifestyle and an Eastern lifestyle, right? From one side, I go to university, right? And I go to this, wherever I live in the West, I've got one style which says dress fancy, live fancy, right? Put your makeup on, wear this, wear the most, wear this that you like. How about this or this? And they say that on one lifestyle, we've got the different life, even though the world is becoming one. The East and the West are very similar. But there's the Islamic concept, which is don't wear this, right? Wear more modest clothing. Don't put on makeup, for example, or don't wear heels, etc., etc. Many people come and say, look, we're confused. There's two different lifestyles and we're trying to cope. I'm a sister living in today's times and I'm trying to cope. How do I live with this? I'm just confused. I want this, but I also want this. I don't say I have the answer to these issues, because I really believe the answers to these issues are within our sisters themselves. But I do know that scrutinizing, putting down, judging, not being supportive is not the way to tackle these issues. Many people will come today on social media, they'll come on Twitter, on Facebook, on these different things, and they'll make very obvious comments that are very condescending. And these comments will hurt certain people. I mean, one person will come and say, look, sister, please, save the makeup that's on your face. I'm trying to be very polite. Don't put on as much makeup. I don't see any more face in your face. All I see is makeup. Right? They'll come out with very condescending comments. And the sister will say, look, if you want me to change how I am, then at least be respectful in the way that I should be. Right? Don't come to me with condescending comments. Come and try to help me. Come and try to guide me. Try to help me move forward. Don't be judgmental. Don't try to put me down. And I mentioned the story 3 or 4 days ago of the sister who wanted to wear hijab, but because she was being put down and because she was being scrutinized, she immediately decided, I don't want to put it on because I'm feeling very judged in my community. There's this battle of East and West, Islam and non-Islam, and it's not easy. As much as a man will come forward and say, look, I understand the issue, I know what it's like to go through that, we can show support. But at the end of the day, Muslim scholarship, female scholarship needs to come up to help sisters with these issues. Because as much as we try to help, I tell you, sometimes we make it worse. Sometimes the alim will come here and make it worse because he'll make a person sound completely evil, right? Because the sister has different background. She might put on some makeup, might wear heels. True. Perhaps her upbringing is a different upbringing. Perhaps the lifestyle she's lived is a very different style. Unless we empathize and work with that individual and try to see where they come from, they're never going to be helped. Or they're never going to say, look, I want to do something different, or I want to stay on the same path. A lot of the times, a alim might make it worse. He'll come and judge and scrutinize and put down, but never really show words of support. Those words of support go a very long way, I tell you. To any human being. To any human being, a word of support. Are you down? Do you need help? Do you like the way you live? Can I help you? Is there anything I can do? These words of support are extremely important to anyone. And if there's someone who shows a peak of Islamic intellectuality and Islamic scholarship, as Lady Zainab alayhi salam, this woman comes in a court completely full of men with the dictator of the time, stands and gives the most groundbreaking lecture on exactly what he did and how he went wrong. And he is so provoked, because typically an Arabian leader is meant to not be provoked. The minute you as a leader is provoked, take a look at, for example, a leader like Obama. Obama, if the world gets bombed, he'll come up and he'll have the most normal, calm face. Today, we have been bombed and 1,000 people have died. Very, very calm. A leader is meant to not be provoked. The fact that Lady Zainab provokes Yazid and gets him to want to get up and beat her means this man was so enraged by the eloquence of what she has said that what she said must have been so powerful it completely enraged this man. And that tells you that her words are very strong. A lot of the times, instead of raising our words, we raise our judgments. We raise our negativity. We raise our voices, raise our words. Let's raise our hearts. Let's try to understand individuals, empathize with individuals instead of bringing them down, judging them or trying to put them to the side. I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to keep us on the path of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us and keep us with the holy household. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.